everyone, and welcome to the Around the Ballpark podcast. Today, we are going to speak with Harry Bachman. He is a lifelong Pittsburgh Pirates fan. So you guessed it. Today, we're going to be talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates. Harry, thank you for joining us this evening.
Hey, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here this evening.
Really excited to talk about this team. But before I do that, I want to make sure that here at Around the Ballpark, we have a sponsor, and we're very grateful for them. And it is the Nashville Tax Solutions, Chris Bennett and the partners there at Nashville Tax Solutions. In the heart of Palm Bay, where the ocean meets the sky, there's a place where tax worries meet their end. Whether you need to file years of missing returns, a current year return, or you need relief from a tax lien or levy, Nashville Tax Solutions has the solution for you. Introducing Nashville Tax Solutions, your trusted partner in the tax resolution industry. At Nashville Tax Solutions, we understand the stress and confusion that tax problems can bring. That's why we're here to offer clarity, relief, and peace of mind. Our expert team of tax professionals are dedicated to providing personalized solutions tailored to your unique situation. Listen to what the people are saying about Nashville Tax Solutions. I recently had the pleasure of working with Christopher Bennett, the owner of Nashville Tax Solutions, and I must say his knowledge and expertise in tax matters is truly impressive. He was able to provide clear and concise explanations, ensuring that I fully understood the process and the best course of action for my situation. Chris's professionalism and attention to detail were evident throughout our interactions, and I felt confident and supported every step of the way. I highly recommend Nashville Tax Solutions, and specifically Chris, for their exceptional tax services. Nashville Tax Solutions saved me from a financial nightmare. Please call Nashville Tax Solutions today at 615-502-2250. Check out their website at nashvilletaxsolutions.com or send an email to info@nashvilletaxsolutions. Remember, Nashville Tax Solutions, where tax resolution is achieved. And again, we had Christopher on earlier with his talking about his experiences at some World Series baseball games. Also that he's a lifelong New York Yankee fan. So I'm sure you'll be seeing him again on this channel, but just wanted to say thank you so much for believing in us and the podcast. Really, no, not right now, everybody, because you're listening to the podcast, but first thing tomorrow morning, because we're recording on a Sunday evening, if you need to, give Nashville Tax Solutions a phone call. So Harry, thanks again for being a part with us. And if you wouldn't mind just giving a little bit about your background, your history, and when you started really following the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Right. Well, I think the first game that I ever saw was Game 7 of the 71 World Series. I remember more because my aunt and uncle came up to watch. We had a color television, so they made the trip from Latrobe to watch the game. But that was a lot of fun. I remember that. And I think the first game that I went to in person was 1972. We went up on a Butler County night where they took a bus down to the stadium, and that was a lot of fun as a little kid. Got my World Series pennant that year, and remember waving that in the 300 level at Three Rivers Stadium. So seen a lot of games in person at PNC Park and Three Rivers Stadium, and just enjoy the Pirates, watching the Pirates. So.
Awesome. I remember we haven't got to go to a Pirates game together, but I believe it was a couple years ago now. We got to see the minor league. At the time, they were the Bradenton Marauders, I believe,
right.
in Port St. Lucie.
In Port St. Lucie,
that was a good time.
Yeah.
I forget. I think it was Dollar Night when we went, or was it
yes,
Bingo Night? It was Dollar Night, yes. Those of you that don't know, minor league baseball, if you get a chance, if you live anywhere near a minor league baseball stadium, I definitely highly suggest you go. Here, local to me here in Palm Bay, Florida, is the Port St. Lucie Mets. And every Thursday night, they do Dollar Night, dollar hot dogs, soda, popcorn. It's just a great time for sure. So today you will notice it is just myself and Harry. Darren had some prior engagement, so that's okay. The two of us are going to have a great time talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates. And so I would love to just dive in. First and foremost, let's talk a little bit about that current roster. So they're sitting out there, where they are in the division right now. They're not, really, they're not doing what they could be. Their potential is much higher than they've reached, but they showed some strides here and there. They've beaten some good teams here and there, especially the Los Angeles Dodgers. We had recently had a sidebar conversation about how they've actually defeated the Dodgers 2 out of 3 times. But there's a lot of potential on this team. So the first person I wanted to kind of highlight, Harry, and kind of get your thoughts on, One guy that really interests me is O'Neal Cruz. I wanted to hear your thoughts on this. Maybe those that aren't familiar with O'Neal on a regular basis, maybe they only see him when the Pirates play their own team. Just tell listeners a little bit about O'Neal Cruz and the impact that he has on the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Well, I mean, you've got a shortstop who's 6'7". It kind of starts there. He's a left-handed bat, and I would say he's got a lot of range just because he's a large human being. So he gets to a lot of balls that some shortstops might not get to. Defense is, I think he's rated probably average, maybe a little bit below average, but he's got a gun. Can make up for a lot of problems with the glove. He'll throw the ball across the diamond at 95 miles an hour. So pretty amazing guy. He also hits the ball pretty hard too on when he's at bat. He had a game against San Francisco where he hit 3 balls. The hardest one hit all season, 121.4 miles per hour. He had one at 120 miles an hour, which had been the previous record until he got up the next time. And then his softest hit that day was only 115 miles an hour, a double to the left center gap. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's pretty amazing. Yeah, well, he'll hit the ball far. He doesn't look like he's swinging that hard, but he's got a tremendous bat speed. One of the top 5 in the game, I believe.
I think there's something to be said of that. My wife's a big fan of Tampa Bay Rays, and right now they have a player, Randy Arozarena, who is struggling mightily. Yes, he's got about 9 home runs in the season, but he's swinging the bat so hard, and it's overswinging things. And sometimes you think you got to get up there, especially when you're struggling, and just swing for the fences. But if you just got that raw power and just get that timing down, that really makes all the difference in the world. So hopefully, I'd love to see Randy bounce back out of that. But O'Neal Cruz is having a good season. Another guy that is a fixture with the Pittsburgh Pirates recently is Brian Reynolds. Just some quick thoughts on him, because he seems to be, for those that don't know, he's a staple. Is he typically the number 2 hitter, correct?
Yeah, he's number 2 hitter. Just a great professional switch hitter. Hits well. He's really one of those rare switch hitters that's really the same guy from either the right side of the plate or the left side of the plate. He's got some pop. I think right now he's got 9 home runs. Very steady, very consistent. He does start out a little bit slow. We've noticed that, in April is a tough month for him. But come June, he started hitting again, and he's doing really well.
Doing really well, yeah. And you can't, there's so many good players, but you can't, of course, not talk about Andrew McCutchen. There's just something right about Andrew McCutchen with the Pittsburgh Pirates uniform. Just didn't feel right when he went elsewhere, and I like to see that he's producing at, he's not what he once was, but he is more than just just an act coming back to say goodbye one more time. He's producing lead off for the Pittsburgh Pirates. What does Andrew McCutchen mean? Because one of the things we'll talk about a little bit later, it'll be interesting to see if he made your list, but we talk a lot about on this channel about the Mount Rushmores of individual teams.
Right.
This is someone that we're seeing still play to this day that may be part of that conversation. What does he mean to this ball club?
Well, what's interesting is they had him a little bit lower in the order. I think he was batting 5 pretty consistently, and things were not going so well. They needed a spark, and they put him at number 1 because whenever he first came up with the Pirates, he was a leadoff hitter, and it has totally sparked him on his season. It's just started to turn around once he got to the number 1 position. But what does he mean to Pittsburgh? Man, he's got to be the guy who keeps that clubhouse loose, because you never know what's going to happen when Andrew's around. He's just a good, solid guy. He's a good citizen. He loves Pittsburgh. Even though he left Pittsburgh, he never moved. It's always been his home. So, and I think he's named one of his children Steele. He just loves the town. And it's interesting that you mentioned him right after Reynolds, because that's who Pittsburgh traded him to, San Francisco, and in return they got Brian Reynolds. So now we got them both.
Yep, that's so funny how those things work out. And I for them, but we all know for Pittsburgh to make a run this season, if they get hot, it's going to have to come down to the pitching. And so right now we look at a 6-man rotation for Pittsburgh, I believe, and so you obviously you start at the top with Paul Skeens. He's what he is. He does what he does. I loved watching that Dodger game when Otani got the best of him at first at bat, and then the next time he just threw three balls right past them. Didn't even come close to hitting it. Do, can that 6-man sustain for the season for the Pirates to make that run? Like, I feel like we need to see Paul on the mound every 5th day instead of every 6th day, but I get why they're doing it. But besides, you have Jared Jones and Josh Fleming and stuff, but can this rotation, the way it stands now, or are the Pirates a team at the deadline that obviously they're not going to be big spenders, but are one pitcher away from at least the second wild card? What do you think?
So they had announced that they went to a 6-man rotation, and then just a few days after they made that announcement, they made another change again. They went back to the 5-man rotation. So he is pitching every 5 days.
Oh, good.
He and Jared Jones and Mitch Keller, they've all been pretty solid. Jared Jones got roughed up a little bit yesterday in Colorado, but the opener, and you may not realize this, but the opener and today's game were bullpen games. So they had an opener followed by another reliever, and they did that Friday and Saturday. Interestingly, they won those 2 games, and they dropped the middle game that was started by Jared Jones, who's the second guy in the rotation. But Skeens, I'll tell you what, man, he is fun to watch. If you haven't seen him, you got to pick up a Pirate game whenever. He's going to actually start tomorrow night. So that would be a good one to watch. He just throws the ball. What's interesting about him, he can throw the ball hard, but he's a pitcher. He's not just a thrower. He is a pitcher. He's got about 5 different pitches. He can move the ball in and out to a left or right-hander. He can move the ball both directions. He's got good speed separation on his curveball. He throws his curveball like 84 miles an hour. So that's actually at 82. I've seen it as low as 82. So that's all, that's 18, 19 miles an hour difference, which is a lot.
It's a lot. Now, one of the things, I'll kind of get to my point in a minute, but nowadays as things become more online, there's more people watch YouTube than they do watch television. More people watch things later than they do when it's live. So it's very few things that are must-see television right now. And we talk about must-see pitchers. I can think of 3 in the last 20 years. For me, at least, that's Steven Strasburg. And then it went to Clayton Kershaw when he was doing his thing when he was a rookie. And now it went to Paul Skeens. Obviously, there's a lot of other pitchers along the way. But just right off the bat, like this guy, like I make it a point to make sure that I'm watching when he's on the mound and making it must-see television on my end, because it's exciting to see Pittsburgh have that guy finally that just the entire team can get behind. And because what's funny is when you look at the Pirates' storied history and we talk about the last 40 years and you talk about pitching, you got to go pretty far down that list to really, they're not really well known for their starting pitchers in that last 30, 40 years. It's a lot of the Hall of Famers are positional players. A lot of their top pitchers were pre-1980 back, so it's just awesome to see what Paul Skeens is doing right now. And I would love to be able to, one of the things we talk about a lot is for baseball to take that next step, we need to see, or we know we're going to see the Yankees and Red Sox. We know we're going to see the Mets and the Braves. Put on Ellie De La Cruz and the Reds against somebody, put on Paul Skeens, put these kind of teams on a little bit more frequently, let America know who they are. Maybe because if you look at the national syndicated television, there's so many teams that get 0 games in prime time. And that's unfortunate when you have a guy like that. And that's why I don't care. And we kind of sidebarred this the other day, but I don't care what team you go up against. If this kind of team can sneak into the playoffs, that's a scary team that I don't want in the first round. I don't even care if it's the Dodgers. That this team in a short series especially would be very difficult to beat.
Right. So we briefly mentioned Jared Jones, Mitch Keller, and Bailey Falter, believe it or not. Pirates got him from Philadelphia. He's been pitching very well. But if you're going to talk Pittsburgh pitching, you've got to look at the end of the game. They've got 3 great relievers who set up perfectly for the 7th, 8th, and 9th. You've got Chapman, Holderman, and Bednar. And that's a great 1, 2, 3 for the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning.
Yes, it is. Now, are you one of those that when you see a chat, like, and I don't know exactly, but like if a Chapman, let's say, comes in the 8th inning with 2 outs, or a different scenario, for me, it always just throws. It feels like everything gets thrown off. Like they go for it all, and then just something tends to go wrong. Like, are you a traditionalist? Like, do you like, nope, he's the 9th inning guy? Because it can be challenging. Because what if he doesn't get a save opportunity in 5, 6, 7 days? They got to get him out there. So I get both sides of it, but typically I wouldn't want to see a Chapman until the 9th inning, even if it's a little bit, oh, you know what, let's get him for that final out. There's something to getting in the moment, shutting it down, coming back out. If you're a closer, you're used to just being in there for that moment. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, David Bednar has done so well for the Pirates in the 9th inning. They love to bring him in, with to start the inning, to start the 9th inning. They don't like bringing him in if somebody else has already started that inning. And really, they don't do that too often. And that goes to Shelton. Shelton does not like to have his relievers come in the middle of a mess. He'd rather just start the inning. He likes the 7th. Like, if he has his way to do it, it's going to be Chapman for the 7th, Holderman for the 8th, and Bednar for the 9th. And that's his cookie cutter approach to it. But it's been working pretty good.
Been working. Awesome. So kind of shifting gears a little bit. One thing I'm excited to talk to you about, those that are listening are going to be in for a treat here. So we're going to talk about some games that you have gotten an opportunity to attend, and kind of have a little bit of a story to share on each of those. So I kind of would love to just jump into one of those. So first, I'd like to talk about, so the date was April 9th, 2001. It was the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Cincinnati Reds, the first ever ball game at PNC Park, and you were there.
Yes, sir.
So can you share that experience with us?
Well, Pittsburgh fans will realize this. We got some really tough news at the beginning of the day, because that's the day that Willie Stargell passed away unexpectedly. So that was kind of a bummer. I mean, everybody kind of knew that it was happening because he'd been sick for a while, but the fact that it happened on that day. But then got into that beautiful ballpark that everybody had been dreaming about for quite a few years. It took them 2 years to build it. And man, it did not disappoint. It was a beautiful day that day. The sun was shining. The Cincinnati Reds ended up winning the game, but we didn't care because we knew we had a beautiful ballpark, and it was a lot of fun. Great atmosphere. Pittsburgh fans are good fans. They're fair fans, and they will acknowledge the other team whenever they do good things as well. So it's always a good time in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and you mentioned beautiful stadium. I've been only to 5 current MLB stadiums, hoping to increase that number as time goes by. But still at the top of that list for me is PNC Park. I have gotten the opportunity recently, those of you that watch us know, to go to Fenway Park, and that was like my number 3 wish list stadium, and PNC Park is my number 1. Just looks beautiful. So hopefully can make that happen sooner than later.
Maybe we'll go together.
Yes, right. do a podcast on the road. Yes. Yeah, and so that was an experience, I'm sure, in itself. Another first time, we'll talk about the theme of first ever game. So shifting gears, because we talk around the ballpark. So sometimes on our way to the ballpark, we talk about some other things. So the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns, Heinz Field, it was September of 2001, correct?
Right.
Game. Now, with that, before we jump into that experience, I just want to make sure the date right, because I'm showing September 16th. Is that?
That is correct. So there's an interesting twist to this story, because we were able to secure tickets to see the last baseball game at Three Rivers Stadium, the Pirates against the Cubs, the last Steelers game at Three Rivers Stadium, which was the Steelers against the Redskins. Again, we talked about PNC Park, Pittsburgh against Cincinnati, and I had tickets to see the Steelers face the Browns in the first game at Heinz Field. But you remember September 16th, 2001, what happened 5 days before? September 11th. So that next week, the NFL canceled the games. So even though I had the ticket, unfortunately, I was not able to go to the first game at Heinz Field. They moved that third week game to the end of the season, and we got to see the Browns play the Steelers in a terrible snowstorm.
Now, terrible snowstorm. There's nothing. I love watching a snowstorm game on television, but being there in person, I can't imagine.
I didn't. Well, it was good. It was good to be there, but I would have preferred a sunny day in September.
Yeah, as a household viewer, when you see, you see it, especially I think Buffalo, a lot of times you think snow games, but and in Green Bay, but you see people with no t-shirts on and they've just got letters written on their chest and it looks
Right.
like it's 18 degrees and it's it's oof. It's
There's some liquid courage going on there, I believe.
yes. So so that, unfortunately, what, obviously September 11th and everything like that, but that's a really cool to have that that ticket showing inaugural game, because
Right.
that was going to be, if I'm not mistaken, because they were on the road the first two games, right? Was that?
They were. Yeah.
Okay, got it. And so you mentioned briefly a second, so we'll dive into that a little bit. So you went to the last ever game at Three Rivers Stadium with the Pirates and the Cubs.
Yep.
And I think, so what was that like? Because was there excitement knowing what was to come, or like, because it feels a little different here. Like, was there sadness, like, oh man, this is whatever, but knowing that PNC Park is right there on the rise in the following year had to make things feel okay. It wasn't like they were losing their club to another city, but still, those that have grown up going to Three River Stadium, I'm sure.
Man, there were so many great baseball teams and football teams, but so many great baseball teams that played at Three Rivers Stadium. So it was the end of an era. We knew that for sure. Going over to PNC Park, we loved the thought of having this beautiful new ballpark, but the team was not very good. So there was a little bit of melancholy about the whole thing leaving Three Rivers Stadium, just because the success that the franchise had in that venue.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of cool because not only you go in October, you see the Pirates and the Cubs last ever game, but then knowing, and I'm not sure if you knew at the time, but 2 months later, getting to attend Steelers Redskins, another last ever game, different sport, in that, and hopefully it's okay to still say that team name on the show, or the Washington football team or whatever they're called now.
There you go.
But so just thoughts on that experience, because obviously two completely different crowds. Me personally, I'm baseball guy. It for me is in person and at home, but those that aren't really big fans of baseball, they prefer to watch it in person and not so much at home. I love both. Football
I
for
do
me
too.
has to be at home unless it's like a special occasion. I just feel maybe with the timeouts and the you take the kids with, and they're like, how much more time, Dad? Oh, 2 minutes, son. Meanwhile, that
Right.
means 45 minutes.
Right.
So maybe that's it. But share a little bit about that game experience.
I'm the same way. I would prefer to watch the game at home, just because it's hard to follow in person. For me, it's hard to follow in person. But the atmosphere that day was pretty cool because the Steelers just routed the team from Washington. And then after the game, they brought out all the Super Bowl champion players. They announced them one by one. And it was just really a great experience because the crowd just went crazy. So it was pretty cool. It was a nice experience.
That's pretty. Yeah, I know the big bummer when everyone shows up to a football game and there's no yellow, moving yellow line and things.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Here we go.
No instant replay. Well, you get the instant replay on the scoreboard, but it wasn't so good back then, in 1999.
Yeah. Now, I can say this, although I'm not a big football fan in person, I've gotten the chance the last 4 years to go to one UCF game, and at the time it was called the Bounce House, and such a fun. It's a long game, especially when you're on ESPN and you have the commercial timeouts. That makes it even worse. But the energy, like nobody sits down from start of the game to the end of the game. It almost reminds you of like watching a soccer matchup of just anywhere else where they're just chanting things the entire game. So a college football experience, unlike any other, that I can say I would love to go to. I would rather see live than in person, or than watching at home for a college football game, because the atmosphere is just amazing with that. So, and then one other game I'd like to talk about, and then we'll have some other things here. But you had also attended, I believe it was a Dolphins Steelers game back in 2004. Is that correct?
So that's all right. So 2004, that was the year that we moved to Florida. That was the Ben Roethlisberger first game that he ever started. For me,
Okay.
even though I had tickets, they were comped to me. I was looking forward to going to that game because of the hurricane. Travel was, I would have been arrested had I left the home and got caught on the road going to Miami. So unfortunately, I couldn't go to that game. So it seems like with Steeler games, big moments, something happens to keep me
Yeah.
out of the ballpark.
There's something to would you like free tickets? Almost means something's going to go wrong or some unexpected cost is coming for you. I remember getting to go to a Dolphins Steelers game myself for free and $40 for parking, flat tire on the way, had to get a new tire, all the costs for the food and everything like that. And I wound up spending over $300, which like, well, I saved money on not spending the ticket, but if I would have not went at all, I would have spent anything,
Right.
So I don't discourage people if you get a free ticket, but just know free doesn't mean free. There are going to be some other other things along the way. So just be cautious of
Very
that
true.
that will
Very
happen.
true.
Yeah.
Yep.
And another cool experience you mentioned to me offline too. You got to go so Shea Stadium's near and dear to my heart, New York Mets
Right.
fan. And shout out to the Mets right now. The date we're recording this, write this date down. 5-game winning streak for the New York Mets. So I'm talking about them with a smile for the first time this year. But so Shea Stadium, love it, miss it. No disrespect to Citi Field. I wouldn't even say Shea is better than Citi Field. I love Shea. That's my first ever game. Will always be a special near and dear to my heart. But you got to go to Shea Stadium, I believe, for a football game, correct?
Yep. So 1978 was a great year for the Pirates that year. They were chasing the Philadelphia Phillies all season long. My mom and I decided that we were going to go to quite a few ball games that year. We went to 13 games that year. I think 3 scheduled doubleheaders back whenever they used to schedule doubleheaders. And our record for that year was 13-0. The Pirates never lost when we were there. So the last game of the season, we had tickets for the last game of the season. And the week before that game, my uncle calls me and he says, "Hey, would you like to go to see the Steelers at Shea Stadium? I've got tickets." Wow, it was like one of those sitcom, scenarios where you've got to make this tough decision and you have to decide. So I talked it over with my mom, and she had the best advice. She said, "Look, you've seen so many Pirate games this year. When are you ever going to see such a great football team in person? You ought to go to that game." So we ended up going to the game up at Shea Stadium. Friday night, the Pirates had beat the Phillies. They were a game and a half out. They beat the Phillies. They started 3.5 games out. They beat the Phillies a doubleheader on Friday night. Saturday, they faced off against Larry Christensen, who hit the starting pitcher, hit 2 home runs that day. They ended up beating the Pirates 10-9 and clinching the National League East. So Sunday, my mom went to the game in Pittsburgh. I went to the football game at Shea Stadium, and it was good. I got to see the Super Bowl champion Steelers, and we had a great season that year. But we should have got tickets for Saturday, not Sunday.
For that Sunday, did you get an RC Cola while you were there?
Pittsburgh, they had their vendor was Aramark, and I don't think they had RC Cola in Pittsburgh. I don't remember.
Well, this is actually when you went to Shea Stadium.
Oh, at Shea Stadium.
Yeah. Maybe it was right before it came out. Maybe. Yeah.
Probably. I was too young to get a beer.
Yeah. The RC Cola, it feels like it's making a comeback now. Like Dollar General, you see RC Cola everywhere. But I just remember my first experience with a soda as a child was the RC Cola. And we make the joke on the show that the cup would disintegrate by the end of the game if you didn't finish it.
Yeah, I've heard it a few times on the podcast. Yeah.
Yes. So, and also too, so what other stadiums have you outside of those that we've mentioned? Are there any major ballparks that you've been to?
So I've been to Fenway a few times. I have relatives who lived up there. I've been to Memorial Stadium in Baltimore. I was actually at Camden Yards. I went to the first baseball game at Camden Yards. It was a preseason game against the New York Mets, the year that they signed Bobby Bonilla from the Pirates. That was 1992. Let's see, Pac Bell Park and Camden Yards, Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia. I went to Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia. So, yeah, it's fun to go see games at stadiums other than your home stadium.
Yeah, and you meant because you mentioned it was Pac Bell Park. You mentioned
yes, Pac Bell Park.
Yep,
I actually was out in California for training. And I took the BART over to San Francisco from San Jose. And I'm sitting. It was great because I was the only person. It was just me. I had to get a ticket for one, so I could pick really anywhere to sit in the ballpark. So I got seats right behind home plate, and it was July, and I'm sitting next to these season ticket holders, and we're talking. And the lady looks at me and she goes, "I just have one question to ask you." This is after like the third or fourth inning. We've been talking the whole game. She goes, "Why did you wear shorts to the ballpark tonight?" I said, "Well, it's July. Don't you wear shorts to the ball game?" She goes, "I have been a season ticket holder for 30 years. This is probably the fifth time in my life I've ever worn shorts to the ballpark here in San Francisco." And like, what's the old saying? The coldest summer or the coldest winter I ever spent was the summer I spent in San Francisco. So God was smiling on me that night, you know?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another, well, and Pac Bell Park
Beautiful
was what it
ballpark, by
was.
the
And
way.
yeah. And so for sure. Now, when you go to this is just a sidebar thing. When you go to a ball game, are you someone that has like a specific section that you like to sit in? Like, I'm not a huge fan. Some people love it. I'm not a huge fan of behind the plate. Like, I kind of like to be where I can see kind of like on the sides, like just above the dugout if I could. There's no bad seat to me in a ballpark, but it's different when you go with the wife and kids. You don't want to nosebleed, or she's got to, walk up and down crazy flights of stairs, or you don't want to be in fear for your life when you're doing the national anthem and that you might tip over to your death. So I like to kind of, especially if I'm only going to be someplace once, I like to sit somewhere low. But do you have a preference of where you usually
So,
like?
like PNC Park, the best place I think to sit is on the first baseline.
Mhm.
Just like you said, just a little bit above the dugout, because, like, especially if it's a day game, because you get a lot of shade in that area, and then you can also see into the Pirates dugout. So
Yeah,
even though you're sitting behind the visitors dugout, you can
you
see
can
into the
see.
Pirates dugout. So that's kind of
Yeah.
cool.
And now of course those that may not know, the netting pretty much at all parks goes, and I think there's a couple exceptions, but pretty much now goes the length of not just the entire infield, but most of the outfield as well.
Right.
And it's a little bit of a bummer because it takes a little bit of the way, but with the balls flying as hard as they're flying, not going to complain about
And
that.
the back.
Yep, and the bats. Yep. I actually one time went to a minor league game in St. Lucie with a family member of mine got hit twice in the same at bat on the same shoulder. Um,
Wow.
he was fine, no bruises or anything like that. Thankfully, I think both times it ricocheted off the dugout and hit him, so it wasn't like direct shot. But like I had to remind them, like, when a righty's up and versus when a lefty's up, you got to extra pay attention. So um, it does make it a little bit more challenging to get a ball. But most
Right.
stadiums, if you go early enough, some can do up to 90 minutes in advance. More if you're a season ticket holder, you can get pop flies or home run balls or shag some balls, that sort of thing. So kind of moving on, one of the things I love to do is just have a sidebar conversation about just a random topic that has nothing to do with necessarily the team that we're talking about, or sometimes it might. So in this case, we've talked about a lot of different things on the show. Today, I'd like to talk to you, Harry, about the impact of the Negro Leagues, specifically now that they're including the stats of the Negro League ball players into the to the stats. So why don't you kind of get your thoughts on that inclusion and actually why it's a good conversation to have in relation to Pittsburgh Pirates?
So, growing up, my cousin and I, we always played the Stratomatic, the baseball game. So we had the baseball encyclopedia. Man, we were always going through that thing, and we knew all the stats for the different years that we were interested in. And if I don't know if you've been on Baseball Reference now, nobody has an encyclopedia anymore. Why? When you have the internet, you go to Baseball Reference. So
Yes.
if you go to some of those years, like back in the 30s and 40s, you'll see players at the top of those statistics that you didn't see before. And the first time you see it, it's like, whoa, I don't remember that. And then you look at it a little bit more, you're like, oh, okay, these are the Negro League guys. So, it's unfortunate that we didn't that they didn't get the experience, or that we were able to, see how great of players they actually would have been had they been given the opportunity to play as many games as the white players played, and in the beautiful parks that they played in comparison to where the Negro Leagues played, and to see how their statistics would have stacked up against. So I think a lot of times you're going to see, like, Josh Gibson, batting average. You're going to see all the ratios, all the averages. You're going to see all those statistics where they have a chance to compete during that time frame when they were playing in segregation, because they just didn't get enough games. I think Josh Bell's got, less than 200 home runs, but we know he hit a lot more than that because they had a lot of games that weren't league games. They were, barnstorming and trying to build up, the game, trying to get people interested in the game. And I think that's one thing that Major League Baseball really owes to the Negro Leagues, because those guys were great entertainers and people love going to see their games. And it wasn't just black people that went to see those games either. White people would go as well. So really, I think it's been long overdue that they get the credit that they're finally getting. And it's good to see it happening.
Yeah. And one thing that, unfortunately, we live in a society now where you go on certain social media and a lot of it is toxic. A lot of it is just the decisions made and they're hiding behind the keyboard and they'll say whatever they want to say. But it seems like, and not that we pay attention to those toxicity, but it seems like it's very, very well positive received, and a lot of people are behind it and are thankful that it happened. And so good to see that when that happens. It's rare to see so much agreement with that. So excited for that. As I was younger too, I would play some, I can't remember the names of the game, but some of the video games that I would play, I remember one, Satchel Paige. And I remember getting to play as Satchel Paige in the video game, and because he could throw, I think it was a 30-mile-an-hour difference between some pitches, and just fooling whatever friend I was playing at the time, just being able to throw that change up when it wasn't expected. And it was just, awesome. So that was really my exposure to some of the players, was just getting to see because they did include them on some games. I can't remember specifically which games they were, but they did include some of the Negro League players in that. And so I enjoyed, that was my first experience getting to know them a little bit. So mentioning
Satchel Paige, I was looking on Baseball Reference in preparation for today, and I came across something that was very interesting. In 1965, he pitched 3 innings for the Kansas City Athletics. In 1965, Satchel Paige was 59 years old.
Yes, that is. I mean, we had joked on the side, the only thing close to that you see nowadays is Bartolo Colon,
right,
in terms of wanting to pitch forever. I'm sure he's in some independent league somewhere still doing his thing, but that's just so awesome, and
right.
So one of the last things as we kind of start closing down here and stuff, we have to talk about one of the things we love to do on the show is the Mount Rushmore. And so let's do a quick, off the cuff. Now I prefer to do in the last 40 years, because that's all I can bring to the table in terms of what I've seen. But for you, right, it can be open door. Obviously, pretty sure if we did a across the board Pittsburgh Pirates Mount Rushmore, you'd only have one player potentially on it from the last 40 years. But so I'll go first with mine from the last 40, and then open it up to yours, that whoever you'd want to, because obviously there's so many Hall of Famers in there pre-1981. So this may be a little bit off the cuff, but again, I want to show some love to some guys. So I've got Barry Bonds, I've got Andrew McCutchen, I've got Jason Kendall, and I've got John Candelaria. Now, I had to include a pitcher in there because unfortunately there's not so many great pitching statistics in the last 40 years, but for me, he was the top guy. I did not forget about people like Andy Van Slyke and some others, but for me, those are the 4. Surprisingly on this show, and a lot of our Mount Rushmores, whether it was myself or Darren, some catchers were being shown some love, because there were some guys that back in the day that weren't just defensive catchers that could do both sides of the ball. So those would be my 4. So go ahead. Leave it up.
So I'm going to do 2 Mount Rushmores. I'm going to do the last 40 years. All right. Because you got to realize there has not been a lot of good things happening in Pittsburgh baseball wise in the last 40 years.
Yeah, it was a tough one. Yeah.
Mine are very similar, but with a twist. Barry Bonds for sure, Andrew McCutchen, and I picked Andy Van Slyke simply because Andy Van Slyke signed up to play in Pittsburgh when a lot of people were leaving Pittsburgh, so he had a little bit more longevity, and he was a heck of a ball player too. Let's face it, and probably one of the funniest baseball players you would ever be able to talk to. I've seen some of his interviews; they're pretty crazy. And then I went with Jim Leyland. I mean, how could you not have Jim Leyland, Hall of Famer? Even though he's not a player, he represents Pittsburgh baseball.
Yes.
From the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. So my all-time, I wanted to get this in there. Honus Wagner, Roberto Clemente, Willie Stargell, and Josh Gibson. Even though he didn't play for the Pittsburgh Pirates, he played for the Homestead Grays and he played for the Pittsburgh Crawfords. So
I'm pretty sure you can mic drop after that and just walk away because there's no debate there. That is outstanding. That was really good. I mean, you can't really debate that. So I'm glad you got to go second because I would have just bobblehead. Yep. Same thing. Yeah. So that was good. Well, as we start to wind down here, just again, where do you see, let's just wrap things back up here with Pittsburgh Pirates of 2024. Where are they end of the season? Are they unfortunately on the outside looking in, or do they have a pathway to that last wild card spot?
I mean, I think there's a pathway there, but in the end, they're going to be looking in because they're going to be on the outside looking in. Because you got to realize Paul Skeens, is he going to pitch the whole year? Is he going to be able to make it, till October? And then even if they get in, would he still be able to continue to pitch? I mean, that's a very valuable commodity. I really think 25 is going to probably be their year where they're going to have a chance to get in there. But shoot, with what they've got, those guys at the top of the rotation, those three, that's pretty tough for another team to have to face that. But their offense, if they could just be average with those guys, they would have a chance. But they're below average with the bats in their hands. It's just really tough. But I will say the second baseman, Nick Gonzalez, he came up. He's the guy who really sparked the team. Moving McCutchen to number one was great, but Gonzalez has just got everybody more aggressive at the plate. They see him doing it. It's, hitting is contagious, right?
Yes,
so,
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
That's
but
true.
Unfortunately, this year, I think they'll be outside looking in.
But you're right, though. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but they are a hitter or two away. You look at a team like this team could be like the 2023 Baltimore Orioles, but they don't have those bats in the lineup. One thing I love about Baltimore this season is they don't care about the righty-lefty matchups as much. 1 through 6 every day, the same guys are in that lineup producing. A lot of the other teams, like just looking at some of the Pittsburgh Pirates lineup for the last 4 days, there's a lot. There's 3 games in a row where they had a different catcher starting the game. There's a lot of flux there. And I think they could be that team in 2025. I think you're right. They're not going to be in it in the postseason this year. But if they can get that special person, whoever that may be, it doesn't have to be the most expensive guy out there. That's the difference. If they can get 4 or 5 deep in that lineup instead of what they have, that's where they turn the corner. But I think the future is bright. Finally, all the years of being so distant. And I know you're the bottom of the division right now, but that division used to be, kind of like the AL Central, but now there's so much competition now in that division. Love to see even that St. Louis is having a better year compared to last year. They're a team that seems to always be there in the end.
It's pretty tight because the Pirates are only a couple games under 500, and they're only a few games out of second place.
Yeah,
so it's a tight bunching, that's for sure.
Yep. So, but thank you again, Harry, for coming on. This is a fun time talking Pittsburgh Pirates. I encourage you, those that have not watched the Pirates game this season, not just for Paul Skeens, check out O'Neill Cruz, check out the team. Fun team to watch. Thank you again, Chris Bennett and Nashville Tax Solutions, for all that you do, believing in this channel. And just all our listeners, thank you. And please, continue to share, encourage your friends and family to subscribe to Around the Ballpark on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And until then, everybody, we'll see you around the ballpark.